When Aaron Paul was cast to play Powerplex in the lead up to Season 3 of Invincible, I practically leapt for joy. I mean, I'm not physically capable of doing a backflip, but if I was, I would have busted out a few. Scott Duvall is such an emotionally charged role to play, and you really need an actor who can capture all of his pain and torment properly. And I think Aaron Paul is perhaps the best casting we could have gotten. While Powerplex is certainly not the strongest villain Invincible has had to combat against, Scott is arguably his most fascinating antagonist to psychoanalyze. And in my opinion, the beauty of Powerplex's character is that his frustration with and hatred towards Mark comes from a very real and understandable place. His sister and niece being killed during the Omni-Man and Invincible fight is absolutely tragic. And the fact that he can't take any legal action against either Viltrumite leaves Powerplex in a very precarious situation mentally. He has all of this pent-up aggression and sadness for his personal loss, but he doesn't have any way to release all of these emotions. He tried to go the legal route and force Mark to face repercussions for the destruction he partially caused, but when that leads to a dead end, he's left confused as to what his next move should be. And unfortunately for Scott, Omni-Man just up and left Earth, so the man who he truly should hold accountable for the death of his niece and sister is simply out of his reach. And because Nolan has left and can no longer receive punishment for his actions, Powerplex set his sights on Invincible. He wants to take all of his pent-up feelings of anger, guilt, and grief and unleash everything he has onto Mark. One of the reasons I think Powerplex is such a fascinating character is because his desire for retribution is understandable, but morally wrong. To anyone with two eyes and a brain capable of logical thinking, it's pretty clear that Omni-Man was the aggressor in this fight and was intentionally causing destruction, while Invincible tried his best to stop him and just ultimately wasn't strong enough to. But for Powerplex, his desire is not to uncover the truth, whether he would like to admit it or not. Deep down, his true desire is to just find someone or something that he can focus all of his anger at. He is not thinking logically, he simply wants to rid himself of all the emotional weight he's been forced to carry. And in his mind, killing Invincible will unburden himself of all of his emotional trauma, as killing the man responsible for all of this death will finally make things right and will serve justice to the man who killed Jessica and Gretchen. But again, Scott has allowed his emotional and mental torment to cloud his judgment and thinking. Even if Invincible was responsible for the death of his sister and niece, which quite frankly he isn't, killing Mark won't bring them back. And ultimately, if he had succeeded in his plan to kill Invincible, it wouldn't have solved anything. He still would have been an empty husk of a man who would just search for the next thing or person to make his obsession. And the fact that he accidentally killed his wife and infant son while fighting Invincible and attempting to kill him was a beautiful way to show that through Powerplex's anger and obsession, he became the very thing he was trying to destroy. He was so focused on unleashing all of his built-up electric energy on Mark with the sole intent of killing him, that he lost sight of the fact that his son and wife were also in the room. All that mattered to Scott was his goal, and because of this short-sightedness, he lost what little family he still had left. And in a way, this showed that Scott is actually far lesser of a man than Mark is. Because even with Omni-Man actively trying to kick his ass, Mark still tried to save Gretchen and Jessica. He didn't allow his main objective, in this case trying to defeat Omni-Man, to take his mind off of attempting to save innocent lives. Granted, Mark was unsuccessful, but it wasn't from a lack of trying or a lack of caring. But in Scott's case, he did stop caring. While I'm not saying he intentionally killed his family, his desire to take Mark out certainly superseded his desire to protect and care for his family in that moment. So clearly Scott has devolved into a villain at this point. But this scene also showed us just how easy it is for a superpowered individual to accidentally kill someone while fighting. If Scott was still thinking logically, this would have caused a massive aha moment where he came to realize that he was channeling all of his anger at the wrong person, and that his crusade to make Mark pay led to him losing everything. But the kicker of it all is that this is all Scott's fault. But instead, he yells at Invincible, claiming that it's Mark's fault that his family is now dead, solidifying that Scott is too far gone, at least for now. In addition to being a fascinating character study, I also love the impact that Powerplex has on Mark. The entirety of Season 3 saw Mark slowly coming to terms with the fact that sometimes taking a villain's life is the only option. And this encounter with Powerplex really aided in his character arc, because it forced Mark to see the impact that he has on people through all the lives he fails to save. While he knows Powerplex is a troubled man who needs help, he also sees the role he played in creating this villain. I feel like this forced Mark to start to realize that in holding back in fights, he would continue to create more collateral damage than necessary, and in turn he'd be creating more people like Scott Duvall, who might lose everything simply because Mark held back and didn't kill a villain when he could have. And I think a great benchmark for determining if a character is truly an iconic antagonist is seeing if they fundamentally challenged or changed our lead antagonist. And I do think Powerplex alters how Mark views himself and his hero work. Mark even says it himself. He tells Scott that he tried to forget about all the people he couldn't save so he could continue as a hero, but he realizes this might have been a mistake after his fight with Scott. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that Scott is a misunderstood hero, or that Mark is the villainous force that Scott views him as. I don't think that's true at all. But I do think that a combination of Cecil, Oliver, and Powerplex opposing his own internal mindset and views do serve to fundamentally change Mark from the start of Season 3 to its culmination. Simply put, Powerplex served as an entertaining, fascinating, and riveting villain to watch, and there isn't really much more you could ask from an antagonistic presence. Well, if you made it this far, please let me know what you thought of Powerplex. Did you find him to be a sympathetic and fascinating villain like me, or do you think I'm chatting absolute bollocks? I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe for more Screen Stories content. I'll also have a playlist with all of my Invincible content linked in the description. Until next time, peace.